Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and my thanks, where did he go? To Colin McDonald, who has led the Department of Justice's national fraud prosecution effort with a tenacity and an effectiveness that is really inspiring to all of us who are on the team. Here in Minnesota, we have the unfortunate distinction of bringing to being the place that brought to national attention the fraud committed against governments across the United States, governments that turned the other way either deliberately or negligently while it was happening under their noses. The numbers that we have here in Minnesota are enormous, but I'm happy to tell you that we have more prosecutors prosecuting fraud, more law enforcement resources investigating the fraud, and we are identifying and investigating and prosecuting fraud at a pace that is unprecedented here in this state. I am happy to report to you all, although I imagine many of you know, that just a short time ago this morning, Amy Bach, cornerstone operator in the Feeding Our Future fraud, was sentenced by Judge Brazel to 500 months in prison. That's 41.6 years. While Feeding Our Future, while that fraud in and of itself was breathtaking, the truth is Feeding Our Future is only a start, and we believe it's only a small fraction of the fraud that is actually ongoing here in the state of Minnesota. And I can say so, Secretary Kennedy and Dr. Oz, it's my pledge to you that we're going to do our best to deter future thefts from your department and from your agency, to recover as much of the losses as we possibly can, and to put the thieves here in Minnesota into prison. And with that, I give you Chairman Ferguson.
Good afternoon. When President Trump said he wanted an all-of-government approach to fighting fraud, he meant it. He wants us to stop fraud by preventing money from going out the door, and he wants fraudsters swiftly brought to justice. And that's why he created the Anti-Fraud Task Force and put Vice President Vance in charge of it, to coordinate both arms of the anti-fraud campaign. Today is about bringing justice to the fraudsters at an unprecedented pace, and the whole country owes tremendous gratitude to the Acting Attorney General, to Assistant Attorney General Colin McDonald, to the U.S. Attorney Rosen, to the Deputy FBI Director Rhea for today's indictments, and also to the Healthcare Fraud Strike Force that was sent here in Minnesota. And I just want to reiterate what was said earlier, having met some of the prosecutors today. The work done at the speed at which it was done is unprecedented, and because of Attorney General Blanche and Colin McDonald, this is going to become the new norm for American fraud prosecutions. We saw last week an example of keeping money in the agency thanks to Administrator Oz and Kim Brandt. The task force helped keep billions of dollars in HHS rather than going out the door to fund fraud. And this week, the other arm of the pincher becomes apparent, with fraudsters who took money from the American people getting their just desserts. That is all about restoring deterrence. And restoring deterrence is important for two reasons. First, this is how we have to save these programs. Fraud is going to bleed our social programs dry. All of these programs are made possible by the most generous country in the world and the most generous people in the world, Americans, turning over trillions of their hard-earned dollars to fund social programs to help their families, their friends, and their neighbors through hard times. If fraudsters get to siphon off that money and put it into their own pockets, these programs, like Secretary Kennedy just said, will not survive in the form to which we are all accustomed. And Americans who've paid in, expecting these programs to be around in the future, will have doubts about whether they will be. So stopping fraud is how we save these programs. And no matter what your party identity is, that has to be one of our goals, saving programs by stopping fraud. The second reason that deterrence is so important is that all of our programs are built for a high-trust society. We didn't set up these programs with layers and layers and layers of anti-fraud redundancy because we set it up for a people who are accustomed to be able to trust their neighbors, their families, and their friends to do the right thing, to be honest, and not to try to bilk their fellow Americans by raiding these programs. It's become clear that social trust has been diminished and that people have taken advantage of these programs. Deterrence is how we restore social trust. It's how we have Americans believing in one another again, believing in their government, believing in these programs, and that social trust is necessary for the entire American experiment to work. Like the Assistant Attorney General said, today's work is just the beginning. The Vice President, at President Trump's direction, is working incredibly hard every day to fight fraud in every agency, and DOJ to stop the fraud after it happens, arrest and prosecute the fraudsters. And I think today makes very clear to every fraudster, if you somehow get money that goes out the door that doesn't belong to you, the FBI is going to find you, put you in handcuffs, and prosecutors are going to throw you in jail. Again, I'm very grateful to the Acting Attorney General and his incredible team, including the strike force that sent prosecutors from all over the country to achieve today's results. President Trump promised justice, and today DOJ is delivering. With that, I'll turn it over to Administrator Oz.
Thank you, Andrew. I want us to think back to what life looked like here in Minnesota a year ago, because that's when we started hearing there were concerns in this state about programs that had been built to provide services that historically had been given by families to their family members who are struggling. Kim Brandt, who's standing behind me, received a phone call, and her team began to work with Minnesota, trying to understand some concerns that were raised, suspicious billing that didn't seem to make a lot of sense. But Minnesota, Department of Health here, said they had it handled. They were going to take care of it. And we didn't hear back from them until the last week of August at a conference, at an event around that conference. There was a comment made by someone who worked in that organization here in Minnesota that they actually didn't have it handled, and there were significant problems that had gotten so out of hand that panic was setting in. And it was at that point that we re-engaged the process and realized that there were programs that had been created here with massive spending that had increased so rapidly that there's no way to save the program. The Housing Stabilization Program, which takes care of people who are struggling with homelessness or substance abuse and many other reasons why they may need housing, especially in a place like Minnesota where in the cold that can be lethal, needed that program to survive. We are all up here because we love these programs. Medicaid is the fundamental payer of last resort for our most needy, most vulnerable citizens. And when we're unable to keep these programs alive because of fraudsters, it hurts all of us deeply. And that's what happened here in Minnesota. Housing Stabilization Program, which had gone from a tiny little program to over $100 million of spending just to find someone on the streets a place to stay, which had been doubling in its expenditures annually, was shut down. Now, these are not the outcomes that we desire, but when you have to force a shutdown, it's an issue. Now, along that way, Nick Shirley, I just noticed standing there, came and started doing videos. I want to call out the folks who are angry and frustrated about this. Thank you, Nick. Who want to, perhaps, if you want to serve, come join us. But if you can't serve, do what you can to shine a light on these cases. And with lots of folks beginning to tell us more and more of the different clues that we were able to put into a larger quilt to understand the magnitude of the catastrophe happening here in Minneapolis and Minnesota in general, we began to take action. Now, I want to point out that a lot of this started during COVID. If you're asking how and why, COVID led to a general abandonment of principles around protecting these programs. The corruption that ensued grew rapidly. Total Medicaid spending has increased by 50%. Since the start of COVID, 50% increase. Spending on prescription medications quadrupled in the last 6 years. Now, the president can work hard, and he has, to deal with fraud, and he made the most favored nation drug pricing a reality because it's going to save the American people $600 billion. But you cannot keep up with fraud if we're not actually getting it at the root cause of it, which is when states do not police their own systems. And so because COVID caused a lack of oversight, and because agencies like mine were gutted in their ability to provide program integrity, we have allowed this monstrous, outrageous increase in spending, which does not benefit anybody, to increase. The 15 arrests today, netting $90 million, is a very important symbol because it's a shot across the bow. And we've all going to say this in our different ways, but I'm telling you, if you're a fraudster, do not walk away from this press conference. Run. Because we are coming after you. We have lots of weapons to be able to use in order to accomplish that. The kinds of reprehensible behavior that we've identified with individuals bribing parents to lie that their children have autism, will carry that diagnosis for the rest of their lives. As a physician, that bothers me to my core. not only are we selling our licenses as doctors when we allow this to happen, we're selling our souls, and there were doctors involved in some of these issues as well. It's rampant failure of this program is addressable, but we've got to be able to deal with it from within. There's a whistleblower. Her first name is Faye. She's on Capitol Hill today testifying, I believe. But she's spoken to me about the fact that there was a general fear within the health agency here of being called the racist. A fear that you'd be politically inappropriate, politically incorrect, and that's fear is what stifled much of the action that should have taken years ago and taken place in an effort to prevent why we're here today. But we will keep coming back and we will keep helping. So let me announce a few things that we are doing specifically on the Secretary Kennedy's leadership at HHS within CMS. We have deferred, as many of you know, $350 million to the state of Minnesota based on two sequential reports from the state of its spending over the last 2 quarters. This is all, again, money that we are going to defer because our job is to protect the federal taxpayer. And as Minnesota is able to justify some of these expenses, we will discuss these. We've also asked for a revalidation of all of the high-risk providers. Again, these are providers providing services for the kinds of things like driving someone to the office or carrying the groceries upstairs, things that, again, your family would often do for you. These of the 5,600 people who are being revalidated, the state has told us as recently as May 7th that only 40% have responded, rather 40% have not responded, or their responses are clearly inadequate. We believe that by the end of this month, which is the deadline, that half of these providers may no longer be allowed to provide services. That is a lot of people doing things to other human beings that are not supposed to have been able to do them. Again, that is the humanitarian risk that we're facing. We're here to fix these problems. We love these programs, but we're going to crush the fraudsters who threaten with corruption the foundation of the social safety that we have built in this wonderful nation over the last 60 years since the foundation of Medicaid and Medicare. We're going to make as many visits as we need to Minnesota. I've been here. I'll come back. So is everyone else on this panel. And my colleagues at OIG, DOJ, FBI, and many others share our passion. Chris, to the FBI.